This is With the First Pick, the CBS Sports NFL Draft Podcast, episode 70. What? I'm Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman. And the With the First Pick Summer Scouting School continues. Today, we're talking defensive linemen and linebackers. And Rick, last year, 4 defensive linemen and a single solitary linebacker went in the first round. And I feel like this upcoming group that we're about to talk about here could be deeper and maybe a little bit more athletic at both positions. What do you think about that?
Definitely a defensive tackle. I think it'll be pretty comparable linebacker-wise, in my opinion. So,
and Debo, he has to say that because Rick has just freshly returned from Detroit, where he saw Jack Campbell, the sole first-round pick of the Detroit Lions.
Absolutely, that's not sole.
No, the sole linebacker taken in the first round. Excuse me.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Clarify.
The number 12 pick was Jahmyr Gibbs, their other first-round pick, who also was electric. But that's why Rick is very excited about the linebacker class in 2023. But we're going to talk about defensive line.
Not really, but that's fine. I'm excited about the D tackle class, but we can talk about the linebackers.
Yeah, we're going to talk linebackers and defensive tackles.
Okay.
24 version.
Perfect.
All right. Does that work?
That'll work.
All right. And look, in case you missed it, on Monday, we looked at some of the rookie standouts outside of Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell and those storylines from the first few weeks of training camp. Rick and Pete made their visit around the Florida teams, and Rick just is freshly back from Detroit, so we'll talk about that. Oh, jeez, pizza. If you're watching on YouTube, Debo was very excited to share this picture. This is Rick and Pete. Where are you here, guys?
That would be Jacksonville.
So this is Jacksonville, which is funny because I sent you, Pete, and producer Dane a text because you were all the same height as Trevor Lawrence. And I said, Dane, how many apple boxes is Pete standing on? And if you're listening to the podcast, there's a very unflattering photograph that Debo has put on YouTube that you can see at NFL and CBS, where Pete is in fact standing on an apple box and is still about 4 inches shorter than Rick. So Dane lied to me. The truth is in the photograph, unless this photograph has been doctored, which I don't think it has been. Has it, Rick?
No, it has not been. And it's kind of embarrassing if you do fly with Pete, he has to bring his little stool so he can sit on it.
Oh, no. Debo has, on the rare occasion, gotten angry DMs from Pete about some of the things he's done that didn't put Pete in a flattering light. I suspect, Debo, you'll be getting another DM shortly.
Well, we've blocked each other, so even if I were to post this, he wouldn't even see it.
There you go. There you go. All right, so check that out on.
Please post it.
Check that out on the YouTubes. If you know what you ought to do, Debo, is text it to Rick and let Rick tweet it out, because Rick would, and I can just see Rick laughing at himself as he hits the send button because he laughs at everything he says.
And so Pete would act like I was the one that took the photo.
Oh, yeah, he would be very angry at Debo. He wouldn't say anything to Rick. He would be yelling and screaming at Debo. So it's a win for everybody, Rick, if you look at it like that. Anyway, we talked about some of the pit stops that Pete and Rick made in Florida. And next week, we'll talk about some of the rookies and their performances based on actual football. Preseason week 2 is what they call it. A whole slew of games coming up starting Thursday through Sunday. And we'll even talk about the Detroit Lions, where Rick has just returned after spending a few days watching practice. And Rick, quickly, give me your thoughts on how the Lions looked.
Yeah, they look very good. I think there's a few things that they have to address, but for all the expectations put on them, since they haven't had expectations, the last time I can recall is when I was there in 1992. The last time they've had some expectations put on like this. But just talking to the people up there when they had to combine practices with the New York Giants, talking with my brother and people there, that they said they maybe had 10 people in the stands to come out and watch practice. Now there's a waiting line just to get tickets to get in, and they sold tickets to this combined practice, and they were sold out within 3 hours.
Unbelievable. So let me see if I can remember correctly. Wayne Fontes was the coach in 92 when you were there?
Yeah. Yep. It was when Barry Sanders was rolling, and we made it all the way, I can't remember the year, to the NFC Championship game.
Eric Kramer, quarterback?
Rodney Peete.
Oh, USC Rodney Peete, baseball player as well. All right, we'll talk about that sort of stuff on Monday, so circle back for that. But for now, we're talking summer scouting. And by the way, you can check out the entire summer scouting series in the old podcast feed. We've done all the offense, and we're halfway through the defense. And finally, good news for you, Rick, we're doing this thing back to our normal twice-a-week schedule, the old podcast, so check that out on Mondays and Thursdays. And if you like what you see here, take a second to hit the old thumbs up on YouTube's at NFL on CBS. And you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, because it really helps the show. It only takes a second. All right, Rick, let's get to it.
Just so you know,
Yeah, go ahead.
I already did the DBs, and I already submitted my answers to the questions to Debo.
So it's funny when you submit your players, and I have you submit them not with the grades or the comps or anything, because you
I do.
Yeah, but not to me.
Separate email, not to you though.
No, right. But I get the names. But I think that you leave them in order, and I have to make a point to sort of cut and paste it without really looking at them, because I don't want it to affect my order. And I can tell you this much: our orders for defensive tackles and linebackers are like two different people who are watching these players play. So this is going to be interesting, and I would imagine you'll be as respectful and kind as you always are. So I look forward to I almost made him spit take there, Debo. I tried to time it just right. All right, let's start with the old defensive tackles here. And going to go to Ohio State. We spent a lot of time in Ohio State with these players here. Michael Hall. And that team was so deep last year when you watched them play. They just had a rotation of guys that were coming through the defensive line. And Michael Hall was I say surprising, but I use that because I didn't know about him until I watched him the other day. But a surprisingly good athlete. I thought he was incredibly. Let me get the numbers for you here. Unofficially 6'2", 285, and 4.96. We'll see if all those numbers bear out over the course of the draft process. Of course, he just turned 20. And one of the things, and I meant to mention this, and I probably should have prefaced this at the beginning of the scouting series, I sometimes hesitate to talk about underclassmen because I know sometimes NFL teams don't like underclassmen to read their press clippings and make determinations on their future based on what some dummies in the media might say. That said, Michael Hall was a fun player to watch. We'll see what his future holds in terms of whether he returns to school or not or comes out. But I liked a lot of what he did. I thought he was a very high motor player. I thought he was incredibly strong given his size. And I thought he did a lot of good things. I watched the Michigan State game where he put up some pretty gaudy numbers and played basically a handful of snaps. So when your success rate is something like 85% on tackles for loss and sacks based on the number of snaps you played, that gets your attention for sure. He is your number one guy. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's kind of like my success rate right now against you in my comps.
Oh gosh, you're not even wrong about that. You say a lot of things that don't make sense. You're 100% accurate on that one. So let me just say before you tell me about Michael Hall Jr., you had him as your number one guy. I had him as my number 3 guy, but I liked him athletically. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, there's no question about the athletic skill set. And I thought for a little bit of an undersized guy, he does play with surprising strength. Where he struggles a little bit is when he has to take on double teams and combo blocks at the point of attack. But this guy has good range. He's a wrap-up tackler, quick first step off the snap, best using his athletic tools and finesse as an inline rusher. I watched him against, unlike you, I try to watch him against guys that he's going to play against in the NFL. So I watched Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. All 3 of those centers were drafted. 6 sacks he had last year, I think can increase to double-digit sacks this year with more opportunities. Now, just as a preview, Ohio State is loaded on defense next year.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah, defensive line, defensive end, corners, linebackers. They're stacked. But I really like this player. I think he has tremendous upside, and I think he's going to take another big jump this year.
You know, it's funny. The comp you used for him, I thought about using the Canadian player whose name I won't mention right yet. I'll let you unveil it. But I went with his teammate, actually, who was drafted a year or two later in Dallas, that is. Osa Odighizuwa out of UCLA. A little undersized. I think Hall's a better player. Odighizuwa had a great Senior Bowl. His tape wasn't that great by comparison. I thought he had some athletic traits that didn't always translate. I think Hall has a chance to be better than he does. But I didn't take Debo's advice. I didn't oversell the comp. I undersold it. I thought you did a better job. Do you like that?
Yeah. Does that mean you're surrendering and throwing?
Yeah. Oh, I gave up last week.
Should have gave up 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, no kidding. I was what's it called when you don't recognize the obvious in front of you? That was my problem 3 weeks ago. Who's your comp for Michael Hall Jr.?
I had Gallimore
Yep.
out of Dallas when he came out of Oklahoma. He was a quick twitched athlete. It's hard to find 3 techniques that can rush the passer. And I think this class, and we'll talk about a couple of these other guys, maybe one of the better classes I've seen over the last couple of years is inline pass rushers that also have some size to them as well. Very good athlete. I think he fit into this right now just because of the upside. And if he does end up with double-digit sacks, which I'm predicting next year,
Ooh-wee.
play time he gets, that I think he'll be in the first round.
Oh, okay. So quickly to recap, the first rounders last year, Jalen Carter went 9th overall. Kalijah Cansey went 19th. You just saw him in Tampa Bay, although he was banged up. I think he didn't play. Mozzie Smith, another Cowboy to go along with Gallimore and Odigizua. He was drafted 26th overall. And then Brian Brzee, who we talked about at length last year, overcoming all the things he had to overcome, another really good athlete. Brzee, I mean, all these guys, oh my gosh. Brzee, Mozzie, Kalijah, Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter's probably the best athlete.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Best player overall.
Who's second best athlete among that group?
Uh,
'Cause that's close.
yeah. Well, if you go with Cansey, but he's undersized, but athletic.
What about Mozzie, though? Mozzie's bigger. Just the
Mozzie, yeah, Mozzie's bigger. Mozzie has some freak athletic traits, but I didn't like the way Mozzie rushed the passer, and he didn't play hard all the time. But
yeah, but I mean just strictly athleticism. You don't see him play. You see him doing the
trying to do the athleticism opposite or away from what we see at the circus that they do.
Right.
At the combine. I'm trying to look at the athleticism on the field, which is the most important to me. And
That's
sometimes athleticism with the combine numbers and the pro days don't always translate to what you see on the field. So I don't try to skew my opinion on the athletic numbers off the field. I try to really evaluate the athleticism on the field.
Rick Spielman, no time for hypotheticals. That's what I'm hearing. All right, let's go to the number 2 defensive lineman that we both agree on. We both had him ranked second. Our guy Debo had a poll for this player in terms of which comp was better. I would imagine I'm going to take a whooping in this one in a second, but we'll get to that momentarily. Your comp is insane, by the way. It's I mean, that's another planet comp for our guy Leonard Taylor, defensive lineman out of Miami, unofficially 6'3", 305, 484. I mean, look, he actually looks like a 484 guy when you see him out there moving around. He is so twitched up. Michael Hall is twitchy. I feel like Leonard Taylor is even twitchier. Played a lot more frequently in the games I watched compared to Michael Hall, but there was less competition on that Miami defensive line. He was consistently quick off the snap. He gave interior offensive linemen all sorts of fits when he was shooting gaps, whether the A or the B gap, and they really had no answer for that. Active hands made it difficult for the interior offensive lineman to lock onto him because his hands were so active and strong. Showed a good power bull rush and could collapse the pocket consistently. I thought sometimes he freelanced a little too much trying to make big plays, but those seemed like easy coaching fixes when you have that sort of athleticism and that high energy snap in and snap out.
Yeah, no, I'm going to agree. I'm not going to elaborate on everything you just said because I agree with a lot of it. I think he just has a unique power or a unique combination of strength and athleticism. And I think this guy has first rounder written all over him just because you can't find guys his size that move like that. And he's bigger on tape to me than we just talked about Michael Hall, but has that same type of athleticism.
Yeah, and I always forget to Debo very conscientiously makes a point to note these things, and I always forget them. You mentioned the Notre Dame game as a game for Michael Hall to watch. He won't be going up against Joe Alt necessarily, but that typically Notre Dame usually is a pretty good offensive line. And then Leonard Taylor, the game to watch. You mentioned Florida State. Does Florida State have any guys we need to worry about at this point along the offensive line?
Not as much on the offensive line, but they're loaded on the offense.
Yeah.
Interesting. Some of it, if I didn't see an offensive lineman, I try to look at the quarterback, and Florida State's quarterback is very athletic. So you're going to be able to see this guy because he's probably going to get a lot of pressures in that game, I imagine, but see his athleticism and see him run down the little quarterback from Florida State.
You mentioned a first round talent for both possibly Michael Hall and then just Leonard Taylor here. I had Leonard Taylor as an early day 2 guy, but of course that can change. And just like offensive linemen, it feels like defensive linemen get pushed up when it's a huge need. And again, 4 of them went in the last draft. And I think this group, I think you agree with
look at his history. And when you're looking at these guys and projecting that they're probably going to be first round talent.
Wait, what was the first part of your question?
Do you ever go back and revisit history knowing that when pass rushers and interior pass rushers come available in the draft, more than likely they're going to go in the first round?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying. My problem is that I temper everything because we're in August, and as Debo notes, you got to go.
You're supposed to not temper. You're supposed to downplay something after you see the tape in their final year, assuming these juniors are going to come out.
That's what I'm learning.
Them the benefit of the doubt when you grade them early. And I always told our scouts that grade them higher or grade where you anticipate they will be. We'll get it corrected after the season, but at least that gives our directors and myself the heads up to make sure that we are on top of those guys, especially during the fall, and evaluate them. We'll fix it at the end, but give them the benefit of the doubt going into the season, especially if they have some traits that you think will translate to the NFL, and especially if you're an interior pass rusher.
I love that advice. I wish I'd gotten that advice 3 weeks ago. That's actually really good advice.
I'm going to pay extra for this too.
Yeah, a little free consulting on the side there. All right. Well, he's a first round pick then. I'm not going to dilly-dally about it. Just to follow up quickly on that, one of the things that you sort of go back and look at were the undersized wide receivers, the guys who are sub 5'11" and are sub 180, 175. And typically those guys end up going early day 3. This year, they all went in the 3rd and 2nd round. So
right.
it changes. So when you try to figure out what's going to happen there, but we'll see. We'll see how the smallish wide receivers work out this time. But to your point, that's a good one. Leonard Taylor, first round pick. All right. Who's next?
We didn't do our comparisons.
Oh gosh, I wanted to get past this.
Oh my.
Oh, never mind. Wait, I don't want to get past this. Who's your comp, Rick, for Leonard Taylor?
I went with Cansey. The reason I went with Cansey is because I saw very similar type athletic traits. And I saw the pass rush that Cansey showed last year. And I think he's probably better versus the run than Cansey was.
Yeah.
But his pad level does get high, and he'll get bounced around some. But I thought he was a more athletic, bigger version of Cansey.
Well, how about South Carolina State's own Javon Hargrave is my comp for Leonard Taylor here. And apparently, according to the voters, Rick, 58% to 42%, they agree that Javon Hargrave is a better comp for Leonard Taylor. Where do you come down on Javon Hargrave?
Yeah, I understand that. They are, and Hargrave was a pretty good pass rusher coming out, but it took him some time.
Yep.
Actually, did he start out in Pittsburgh, I believe?
Yep. 3rd round pick.
3rd round pick in Pittsburgh. To me, Cansey and Leonard Taylor are much more polished and ready to go earlier in their career. So.
No, I agree with that part. All right, good. That's a win for Wilson. We desperately needed the win. Still in last place, convincingly so, but whatever. A win's a win, moral victory or otherwise. All right, let's
change. So
5-2 is the updated tally.
5-2. You love to see it. All right.
So let's get to vote for you. I think this is a fixed election here.
Oh God, here we go. Here we go. Pete Prisco with the election denier. All right. Let's go to Illinois. Talk about a stacked defense. That defense last year at Illinois was stacked. They had guys drafted in the secondary all day long that we talked about frequently. And this year they're going to have, and I think I had him as a 1st round guy. I'm going to move him to 1st round if I didn't, based on our recent conversation here. Their defensive lineman, Zerjan Newton. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. We'll get it by next March for sure. Zerjan Newton. Let me get the size and weight on you. It's 6'0", so 6'1", 300 pounds unofficial, 5'0" unofficial in the 40. He's going to be 21 years old next month, or at the end of this month, excuse me. And that's, no one cares about that. That age is perfectly fine. But he consistently was quick off the ball, consistently active hands, very similar to what you saw in Leonard Taylor. I just thought he was a little more polished, and I thought he's a little more consistent in terms of making plays. He was in the backfield a lot in the games I watched. Again, sometimes was oh gosh, I'm trying to find the weaknesses. I didn't see a whole bunch of weaknesses in this game. Consistently stout at the point of attack. I thought he held up to double teams pretty well. And you mentioned that earlier about Michael Hall. And let me ask you this, Rick. When you say that, to me, that means you're not getting pushed off the ball. You're able to keep the guys, maintain two blockers at the line of scrimmage while your teammates do work. Is that how you view being good against double teams, or do you want them to like break through double teams?
No, you want them to see us double teams, combination blocks, angle blocks. If they can drop their weight, if they bend at the knees and can anchor and fight off that pressure. So to me, that's when I'm looking there. Some of the guys aren't as strong through the lower body, or they get their pad level too high. So that's when they give ground, and I just watched a bunch of pro tape, and you can see some of these young guys and that played high in college, but that is all things that can be taught when they get to the next level, because that's more of a technique thing, unless they're just stiff through their lower bodies.
And what do you think of Newton?
I liked Newton. I think he, out of the last two, I think he was the strongest at the point versus the run, where he did drop his weight and anchor. I thought he wasn't as quick twitched as a pass rusher in line. I think he relies on power and then a counter move. I don't know if he is as finesse and as athletic, utilizing finesse type moves as an inline rusher, but he can definitely rush the passer, just a different style. But I thought this guy had upside as an inline rusher. And I think this guy, with another strong year, he'll be another first rounder, in my opinion.
Yep, I had early day too. He's going in the round one now after a conversation.
Do you have no D tackles going in the first round so far?
Well, the thing is, I'm gonna have to do a mock draft pretty soon, so some of these guys are gonna have to go, and maybe I'll put every single one we talk about in here so I can cover my bases.
Oh my God, you got a mock draft coming up? Can't wait.
Man, the football season's about to start. What do you? I don't get to have all my little side jobs. I got to do that. That's my thing. Who is your comp for John Newton? And you're doing a mock draft this year, by the way. So just
that's not my contract.
I don't think it's specifically in mine either, but they tell me I got to do it. All right, who's your comp?
My comp for Newton was Sharif Floyd when he came out of Florida and when we drafted him in the first round.
Once again, you're cheating with your comps.
What are you talking about? He's thick. He can play the run. Sharif did, and if Sharif had a really good career starting to come around until he had that devastating knee injury. Never was able to recover. But there was a lot of traits to Newton that I saw when we drafted Sharif Floyd. I
went with Geno Atkins. How do you feel about that?
Geno Atkins was quicker twitched. He was more Cansey-like.
I think that Newton's a little twitchier than you think he is, though.
No, I'm not saying he's not twitchier. I'm just saying his style was more power to counter. Okay. I didn't say he was not twitchy.
Why did Geno fall to, I think it was a 4th round pick? Is that because it's undersized?
Undersized.
Yeah, okay.
This guy's not undersized. Thank God Debo didn't pick this comp. I think he's cherry picking to help you out, to be honest.
I absolutely cherry picked on this one.
Thank you, Debo. I will take it.
The familiarity with Javon Hargrave. I tried to help Ryan out and not go with Michael Hall on this one and Osa as his comp.
Thank. That's also. I do wonder. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who watches and listens, of course, but I don't know if all the viewers and listeners have watched all these players that we're talking about to be able to do the comp. So I think they're just sort of sometimes guessing, and they're not guessing in my favor. So I think that, again, reflects poorly on me. Whatever, I'll take it. All right, so let's see here. First round guy again. He was my DL number 1 right now, Rick. You have him as your number 4 in the list of guys we're talking about, I think. Is that right?
3.
Number 3, okay. And the game you're interested in is Iowa. Why do you like Iowa?
Just because they always have good offensive linemen.
Yep. All right, that checks out. No more needed to be said about this. All right, let's go to number 4 here.
Oh, I'm sorry. He was number 4 for me.
Oh, okay, I thought so.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll get through these last 2 on defensive line and then turn our attention to the linebackers.
They say patience is a virtue. But for some things, we can't wait.
All right.
Oh, Ryan, can I just mention that my Delta flight back today to hustle back here to do this podcast?
Yeah.
They had Paramount Plus, and I watched the Tulsa King on the way home.
It's pretty good, right?
I have to call you to figure out how, since I have it, to put it on my TV, because Tulsa King was very good.
It was very good.
Fly across the world to be able to watch Paramount Plus.
He's spending $800 an hour to watch Paramount Plus on those flights. Tulsa King with Sylvester Stallone is great. I agree wholeheartly. All right, Rick, let's and I'm glad you got to watch Paramount Plus like the rest of the world. I'm going to group together our 4th and 5th players here along the defensive line. Mason Smith out of LSU and Ru Orororo. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I'm going to group them together here in part because they're similarly sized. Mason is 6'5", 298, and I think Ororo, which is going to be fun to say, is 6'4", 289 unofficial. And
row.
isn't that what I said? What did I say?
No.
What? Ororo. Is that what you said?
I think it's Othorotho.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, if we had a producer that would actually produce pronunciation on names, it would really help.
Well, I just looked up the pronunciation, and it's Rook Ororo.
Ororo.
I just want to hear you say that. Yeah, that's what I've got from the Clemson website.
Okay.
So unless they don't like him, I think that's how he goes.
I don't think me putting guides on your rundown would help either. How am I supposed to phonetically write down Jalen Hurts?
All right. Anyway, these guys are similarly sized, and I thought one of the not concerns, but one of the things that sort of stood out to me when I watched them play was that they at times got too upright and they would get pushed off the ball at times, and those were concerns. Not concerns that they're not going to get drafted or be great players or have great seasons, but when you compare them to the three players we talked about, they were a little different in terms of the strength at the point of attack. I don't know if you had any different thoughts on those two guys, Mason Smith and Rook Ororo.
Yeah, Mason Smith, to me, he's a unique size guy that has excellent athleticism and twitch. Again, technique, which you talked about. But when he shows, I had to go back to 2021. I wasn't good enough to do the 8 plays that he played in at the end of the season.
I did 2021 as well because he hurt his knee in week 1, I should mention, last year, and he didn't play.
So he's coming off that torn ACL. But I really like this guy's upside. This guy can bend and dip. He plays with leverage. He's very flexible through his lower body. He can run. He shows a lot of flashes in 21, but needs to be more consistent. And he has to show that he's going to be durable. And if he can show and play through every game this year and show that he is durable, that this guy will definitely be considered in the first round. He has first-round traits written all over him.
And I should note, the 2021 tape I watched, that was obviously over a year ago. And a lot of the concerns I had about the strength could have changed. He could have gotten a lot stronger last summer. He just didn't get a chance to play other than a handful of plays in week 1. So maybe those things aren't even an issue. But as you know, you like the athleticism. I think I had him as a second rounder. You had him as a first rounder. Who's your comp for Mason Smith?
I went with Javon Kinlaw, the kid that came out of South Carolina.
That feels a little rich. He was incredibly powerful coming out of South Carolina, wasn't he? And bigger.
I'm just telling you, this guy will be a first-round talent.
I went with someone.
Michael Brocker, too. That was my other.
Okay.
Back and forth between those two. But because of the athleticism, I went with Kinlaw.
Well, I'll mention my name and then we'll move on quickly. Perrion Winfrey. I thought Perrion Winfrey. Rick laughs. Good athlete. Did a little bit.
Very good comp. I really respect that comp.
Thank you. I wanted to see more out of Perrion Winfrey coming out of Oklahoma. He was a good athlete. I think that Mason Smith will provide us that opportunity because he still has a year left after missing most of last year. Okay. Rook Ororo. That's going to be fun to say throughout. Who's your comp for him?
Oh, this one I went deep and trying to make a comparison. And this one was a hard one for me, I have to admit.
Okay.
But Boya Mafi, the defensive end from University of Minnesota, both Nigerian kids. When you watched Mafi, when he came out, as you watched the year before, he was very raw, had a lot of physical tools, but still learning how to play the game. I think even though they played different positions, this kid played up and down at all the positions, but I think he's a 3-tech. You can see all the traits that you're looking for. He only has, I believe, has played football since his junior year in high school. So he's got a lot of growing to do as a football player, just like Mafi did.
Yeah.
Mafi's instincts continue to get better the more reps he got. I think this kid will be on that same path.
And like Mafe, he's a little older. He's going to be 22 in October. That's fine. But I think Mafe was probably 23, maybe a little older when he came out. He was right around the COVID time. So I don't think and I can't remember whether he opted out or stayed an extra year or whatever, but he's now in Seattle and he's having a pretty good camp, which is great news because I liked him a lot coming out as well. I went with the Marvin Leal because I too had no real comp for him. Leal's a thicker player. The expectations were pretty high for Leal coming out, and he had an okay final year at Texas A&M. He's now in Pittsburgh. as a part-time role and looking for big things in year 2. All right, that's it. Those are our 5 defensive linemen. They're not the only 5 defensive linemen. Those are just the 5 guys we watched that we were interested in seeing. There's going to be a lot of other guys to talk about. So don't take it personally if we didn't talk about your guy. We will definitely get to him over the next 8 or 9 months. Now, this is where things get interesting, Rick. The linebackers. And your guy at the top is not my guy at the top. Your guy at the top is my number 3 guy. But we're going to start with Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah, no, I liked him. He's undersized, but I thought he was very smart, very instinctive. I thought he had good athletic skills. He was quick to read and react in line, solid tackler, but lack of length shows up on some of his missed tackles. He was a good athlete in zone coverage. He really has a feel to cut off and get in the throwing lanes, got his hands on a lot more balls than I anticipated. I thought he did a nice job working through blocks in space on screens. He was good timing as an inline blitzer. Small linebacker, and just like all the small linebackers, he struggled trying to get off blocks. But I thought this should be a solid 3-down type starter in the league. May not initially be that starter, but eventually will be. So I thought this guy was, again, a Friday talent, 2nd round. I put him in right now. I didn't see any first-round talented linebackers as of yet. I know there's a lot to go. But this guy was a really good football player, probably a better football player than he's going to be athlete. But I thought athletically he showed up on the tape.
5'11 and a half, 225 unofficially, 4'7 unofficial as well. He's 20 and a half years old right now, so he's young. And I liked him a lot. I thought he's incredibly smart. And to your point, good athlete, but not the best athlete on that team at the linebacker position, because someone there's pretty special athletically. But I thought he was a really good player. And I think I had him as a day 2 guy as well. I had some questions about the athleticism at times in space. Do you think he's good enough to play in coverage in the NFL?
I do, just because of his instincts in zone.
Okay.
I've seen a couple. He batted some balls down. I think he had an interception in one of the games I watched. He just has he did inherit his father's instincts.
So Jack Campbell, we talked about him. He went 18th overall, the only first-round pick at linebacker in the draft a few months ago. There are no linebackers in round 2. So let me ask you, you mentioned Jeremiah Trotter as a day 2 guy. Drew Sanders, Marty Mapu, Dayon Henley, and his former teammate Trent Simpson, who was incredibly athletic but didn't play with the instincts that Trotter does. Of those guys, do you like Trotter the best, or would he slide in there in between there?
Yeah, I like Drew Sanders because of the size and the length and the athleticism. But I think he slides in there with those guys. And I think, like I said, teams are going to have to determine how much upside he has. He's still young. He can still get better, learn how to use his hands a little better, taking on blocks. But, this guy's a very smart football player, very good football player.
And in the least surprising news of the offseason, you have again gone with a Minnesota comp because you got to see this player 5,000 times, and that is going to skew your opinion. What's your comp for Jeremiah Trotter Jr.?
He reminded me of when Eric Kendricks came out of UCLA.
He was pretty special. Kendrick's a better athlete though, right?
Probably a little better athlete, but the instinctual part of linebacker to me, which is the most important part, to play that position, very similar instincts to what Eric Kendricks had. And Eric Kendricks was small, struggled getting off some inline blocks, but got better at that and physically matured. But he reminded me of the instinctual traits that Eric Kendricks had.
How do you like my comp of Malcolm Rodriguez?
I love it. I think Debo should have used this as a comp.
Is this the one you did the poll for, Debo, or not?
I am. I'm bringing that up right now.
Fingers crossed.
What do you expect the percentages to be?
I'm going to say that because Rodrigo was so popular last year, somehow a day 3 pick should have been a day 2 pick at least. I'm going to say Rick wins like 54-46, something like that.
That is a horrible guess.
Oh no. What an absolute ass kicking. Oh, I got my hopes up. That's a sad day. Eric Kendricks, 73%. If you're listening, Malcolm Rodriguez, poor Rodrigo got 27%. Again,
when I said horrible, did you think you had won?
I was hoping maybe Rick lost. I was hoping it gets hope.
At least Debo didn't cherry pick one. At least he actually did something that was an absolute arse whipping.
All
This
right,
might be the
whatever.
biggest spread out of anything we've done so far, Debo, is it?
Yeah, that covers the biggest spread. So it moves to 6-2 with only the secondary left.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm gonna have to cheat. I think that's what we're coming down to. All right, let's go to number 2 on our list. As we aggregate the rankings here, this player was number 1 on my list, number 3 on your list, Rick, I believe. And this is Jeremiah Trotter's teammate, Barrett Carter. And Barrett Carter, and bad news for you, we have the same comp for him. So that means
Because I send it when Pete sent out that he liked you followed Pete's advice, because this was Pete's favorite guy too. And then I put out what my comp was in a text chain. And so I'm assuming that you still did it by yourself, but I did give you a little hint in my text chain.
Pete, I was talking to him yesterday. He reminded me of that fact as well. Maybe it got into my subconscious. But that's sort of who it reminded me of. Barrett Carter, the linebacker, unofficially 5, almost 6 feet, 5'11 and a half, 229, 4.55 speed. He looks faster than that. And, we'll spill the beans on the comp here. Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma, who ended up being a 3rd-round pick, I believe. I think Carter has a chance to go higher than that. I think he could sneak into the bottom of the 1st round. I think he's that good. And I'm just interested to hear what you say, Rick, because I'm guessing the reason I don't want to say you dinged him, but the reason that you had him 3rd and not 1st or 2nd is because of the size. Is that the concern?
Size, and he plays in a slot a lot. And but he makes some incredible athletic plays. The one that really stuck out to me was I watched the Louisville game. He had a great sack where he leaped over the running back and ran down the quarterback. This guy is an effective blitzer if he's free. I recognize all the athleticism. It's just the size was a little bit of a concern. And
so
he's going to be stacked inside. Is he going to get engulfed?
Oh, okay. I see
him in space all the time.
You don't care that he's versatile. You care that he's slight of frame. And when you play him inside, that's going to be a problem.
Could be, yes.
So knowing everything we know now, and we know now that it hasn't gone great for this player I'm about to mention, they play similar positions, different body types. But I'm just curious, who would you be higher on in terms of next level success? Barrett Carter or Isaiah Simmons?
Simmons, they can't find a position for.
Right.
This player. I think that he is a will linebacker, but he has to be covered. And he is more instinctive than Trent Simpson was.
100%
coming out. And
I agree with that.
Was a great athlete.
Simpson went in the 3rd round, had a lot of 1st-round buzz because of the athleticism. And I think I want to hear your rankings. My rankings for these linebackers, if you include the 2022 class coming out of Clemson, I would have Barrett Carter 1st, Jeremiah Trotter 2nd, and Trent Simpson 3rd.
I would have flipped the 2.
But you would have Trent Simpson 3rd, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that tells you how good this group is, that the 3rd of the bunch is an incredible athlete who's now in the NFL as a 3rd-round pick. All right. We both said Brian Asamoah, who's undersized. And how did Brian do last year? I didn't watch him closely.
Special teams guy was a backup. He'll get an opportunity to maybe start this year. So we'll see.
Okay. You said 3rd round for Barrett Carter. I think he goes a little higher than that. Both players you mentioned as games to watch is Florida State, and you talked about Florida State earlier.
And the reason I want to see these linebackers versus Bell, the transfer from South Carolina to Florida State, who's incredibly athletic. That was my matchup that I wanted to watch these two again.
That's a great point. We talked about him during the tight end segment, but he lines up everywhere. So, in fact, I think we both had the same comp for him too, Chig Okonkwo, I believe.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would feel bad too if you had the same comp as me. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and hit the final 3 linebackers before we get out of here. Right after this.
We don't get a try run. We only get one life. So enjoy the ride. Just live your life one day at a time. And enjoy the ride.
All right, next up, Rick, we're back to Ohio State. I feel like we should just move the studios to Ohio State, do everything from there. Tommy Eichenberg, linebacker. There's some conversation he might come out last year, and I think during the fall we did a podcast where I had him as my just good football player, and you very unceremoniously pointed out to me that he had returned to school. But I'd watched him, and I liked him. I liked him a lot. In terms of where we have him ranked in our conversation today, he was my linebacker 4 of the guys we watched. You had him at number 2. I love everything about him. We talk about Jeremiah Trotter being incredibly smart and knowing where to be. I feel like Eichenberg's the same way. I think Eichenberg's slightly less athletic than Trotter, and obviously less athletic than Barrett Carter, who I like a lot. And that's the concern I have, sort of him getting lost in the middle of the field, asking him to do athletic things that perhaps he struggles with. But there's a lot of good things to like about him. I think he comes in day one and contributes right away as a starter whenever that day comes for him in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I at linebacker, I understand the athleticism and how important it is, but I always put whether it's right or wrong, instincts is my number one thing when I watch linebackers. And I thought, just like Trotter may not be as athletic as some of these other linebackers that we're talked about, but this kid's very, very instinctual, plays with high energy. His instincts against the run, he tacks downhill, wrap tackler, good enough range. He has awareness and zone coverage. I don't know if I play him in a big heavy dose of man coverage. But he's going to be the quarterback of the defense, the green dot guy, calling probably the defenses, lining everybody up. Smart, savvy, instinctive. I don't want to put him in old school because I still think he can play 3 downs, but he just was solid across the board on all 3 phases, in my opinion.
I agree. Day 2 grade from the both of us here. I'll give my comp first because I just did this. I took Debo's advice. I said Gerard Mayo. I said that, and in parentheses I put Blake Martinez, which is my real comp. But give me your comp because no one cares what I say at this point about these comps.
Drew Tranquil when he came out of Notre Dame, and I undergraded Drew.
Yeah.
But now, he just signed a deal with Kansas City, played very good had a really good year last year out in LA with the Chargers. So this guy, he reminds me a lot of the traits that I saw in Drew. And when you go back and revisit guys you undergraded, I undergraded Drew Tranquil and what type of pro he's become. So I can see Eichenberg having that same path.
Do you know why you undergraded Drew? Do you remember what changed your opinion?
I got a little bit too hung up on athlete instead of instinct. And that's why when you go back and revisit things, and that's something that I would recommend for you is as you follow these guys through their NFL career, if you were off on a guy, why were you off? What was the biggest point of emphasis? And that's why I changed more when my brother came out, he wasn't a great athlete, but he had instincts. I was born with hair and a square chin and good looks. He was born with change of direction and instincts.
So are you a better athlete than Chris?
Yeah, that was a whole nother story. He was stronger. Probably I was probably stiff, but I can run straight and jump higher. I just couldn't change direction like him, and I didn't get the instinctive gene like my brother got. I got the hair gene and the
handsome gene.
Yeah.
So all right, let me ask you. We can't play one-on-one football, but one-on-one basketball in your prime, who's winning?
I would probably say Chris.
Oh,
yeah, with you.
Okay. A foot race, you're winning that.
Yes. In fact, when we worked construction one summer in high school,
another job.
Yeah, another side job. I won every race, so the workers would bet on me and Chris all the time. So I actually had to wear cement boots when we raced at lunchtime.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine being the contractor with these 2 numbnuts out there trying to get stuff done and they're out there racing in cement boots?
He didn't have to wear the cement. I was like one of those secretariats running straight line. I had to have some extra weight put in my saddle to make it an even race.
If you shaved your mustache, you'd run even faster. That thing was slowing you down. All right, let's get to these last 2 linebackers. I gotta go do HQ in a second here and talk about some more rookies. So listen, this guy you had ranked 6 out of the 6 guys we watched. I had him ranked 2nd, and again, I think I know where this is going to go. So Smail Mondon out of Georgia, insanely athletic. The instincts aren't quite there yet, and I think that's probably some of your concerns in addition to the size. But I was blown away with the athleticism and the ability to run around. Super high motor, played much bigger than his listed weight. And let me get that for you so we can be on the same page. Where are you, buddy? There you are. Unofficially 6'3", 220. So he's a beanpole. 4'6", unofficial as well. I thought he played bigger and even faster than that. But again, needs to get more experience. So maybe that lends a conversation about instincts, and I thought the size is probably something that slowed you up a little bit.
Size and strength. I didn't think he was very powerful taking on blocks, but I do recognize the athletics. Eddie was a very good athlete in coverage, especially for his length. Just a little awkward getting out of his transition and routes in front of him. I didn't think it was a great blitzer. Good closing speed, but I thought that once he was engaged in a block that he struggled to get off. And I did question some of the instinctual things that you mentioned.
So him or Channing Tindall, who's a 3rd-round pick last year coming out of Georgia?
Probably this guy. I think he has more
Okay.
upside.
Okay.
They'll be determined this year if
Right.
if he shows up a little bit more instinctually.
All right, I feel pretty good about that because that's a conversation I was sort of going through because I thought Channing Tindall got drafted higher than I thought because of the athleticism. Hasn't done much yet, but that doesn't mean he won't. All right, I did the comp here. I don't think you did one. You were too busy running foot races and cement boots. I went with Jabril Cox. Who cares? Jabril Cox is a better, more experienced player. It doesn't really matter. I think that we can see. I think we see Mondon go on deep.
Put yourself down. I like that comparison.
Ah, shut up.
I can come up with one, and you came up with one better than me because I didn't put any.
You didn't do one. I think Mondon has a chance to be a day 2 guy if he has a good season because of the athleticism.
I would agree with that.
All right. And finally, let's go to UNC. Talk about Cedric Gray. He was my number 5 guy on this list. You had him as your number 4 guy. And I liked him. I didn't love him. I thought he did some things well. Let me get the numbers for you here. He's a senior, so he's a little older. 6'1", almost 6'2", 230 pounds. Listed as a 4-5 guy. I wasn't convinced he played that fast from what I watched. Let me see what I have here. I thought sometimes he's a half step slow to diagnose misdirection plays, ran himself out of place sometimes by guessing. I wanted to see a little bit more instinctiveness in his game. I thought he was willing to take on blocks and fill gaps, and that's what you want from an off-ball linebacker. But I didn't love him as much as the other players we've talked about so far.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you on most of your points, but I thought this guy was athletic. He needs better awareness on some of these angle blocks. Played better versus Pitt and Oregon than some of the other games that I watched. This guy is a solid hitter. He's athletic in coverage. He can be effective in as a blitzer through the A gap. He knows how to work through edges and have an effect on the quarterback. He got beat on a wheel route in the Miami, Florida game, which I didn't like.
He didn't either.
I thought this guy was a borderline day 2 guy right now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. This is going to be fun to revisit and see where these guys end up going. What was your comp for Cedric Gray?
Dorian Williams.
He's a really good player out of Tulane. Let's see where Dorian got drafted. He was drafted 3rd round.
Buffalo.
Yep. Went to the Bills. That's a great pick. Golly. I don't know how he's doing at camp, but in terms of on paper, that's a fantastic selection. I had a few more concerns than you did. So I went with Chaz Surratt, who also played at UNC. He was a good athlete. Didn't quite live up to the hype at the next level, at least not yet. We'll see. Hopefully Cedric Gray has a fantastic
in the Hall of Fame game.
What's that?
He did have a pick, Chaz Surratt.
Oh, he did?
Him, yeah.
I didn't see that. What a great comp by me then.
Yeah.
All right. And you mentioned the Clemson game as a game you want to see Cedric Gray do well in.
Right. Just because of the running back and, in the ACC, I didn't really see any offensive linemen, but Clemson's going to have athletes all over the field. And then other guy before we go.
Yeah.
Just keep your eye on this Curtis Jacobs from Penn State.
Yeah, I watched him too. Let me give the numbers real quick, and you can tell me what you thought about him. 6'0", also almost 6'2", 236, 4'5"-ish. I'll just tell you who he reminded me of. Who's the kid that was drafted from Penn State by Carolina? Brandon Smith. Incredible athlete, just didn't put it together. That was my concern with Curtis Jacob. Go ahead.
Yeah, mine was Henley from Washington State.
Oh boy, that is way too rich.
I'm just telling you, this guy is athletic. He can run. Speed shows up in the open field. Little out of control as a blitzer. He has skills that will ascend once he improves his technique. This guy will definitely go on Friday.
Oh, definite. Make a point, Devo. He says definite. All right, do you want to do a $1 bet on that? Because I got to make some money back.
We're going to do a $1 bet on all of our where they're going to go in the draft.
Okay.
Your season, see who was more accurate trying to predict
All right.
These guys are going to go before they play their last year of college.
That's a good idea. All right, I'm down with that. I think I'm going to make a lot of money on this Curtis Jacobs thing. I'm just kidding. I want Curtis Jacobs to have a good season. I don't want to make a dollar on this poor kid has a bad season. I end up making 100 pennies off of it.
You're really way behind on the dollar bets last year, this year, the comps, now we're going to do the predictions on what round they're going to go before we even see them play. So,
in my defense, you have a 30-year head start, but I'm trying to hold on for dear life. It ain't going well. All right. That is it, Rick. That's episode 30, episode 70 in the books. It does not feel like 30. It feels like 130. So if you haven't yet, give us a little thumbs up if you're watching on the YouTubes. Thanks as always to my guy, Rick. Thanks to Debo for producing, and thanks to all you guys out there who watch and listen. We'll be back on Monday to recap the preseason games. Have a good weekend.